Mark Davis in for Hugh, who is wrapping up his front half of the Dennis Prager cruise. Let me share with you some of the host chessboard that's going on here in Salem land, here on the Salem News Channel. Hi, waving at you on the screen at your device. Thanks for watching. Salem Radio Network, thank you for listening. Appreciate it very much. If we haven't met, and we probably have, I'm Mark Davis. As soon as I'm done here with you, I'm going to slide down a bat pole in this building in North Texas and do my own local show here on 660 AM The Answer, where I've been holding court here in DFW for a little over a dozen years. And one of the really cool things was I get to do this and fill in for a bunch of people. And I've been doing a lot of filling in for our great friend Dennis Prager, and it looks like there's some more of that coming on the pipeline as well, because the reason Hugh is not here right now is the same reason that Mike Gallagher is not in his show for the next few days, and that is that Hugh and Mike are tag teaming what was called, and what is in its heart very much still, the Dennis Prager Caribbean Cruise. Dennis would have been on that ship, but for an accident in his home, I guess about 3 weeks ago now, and that recovery is steady but slow. It is what they call a process. And during that process, we are praying for our friend Dennis. We invite your prayers for our friend Dennis, and we're just keeping all the home fires burning. I'll go wherever they send me to fill in for whomever, and it's great to be here for Hugh this morning, and we're very glad that you are here as well. Speaking of Brother Gallagher, Scott Jennings is filling in for Mike Gallagher today, later on the Salem News Channel and many of these fine radio stations. And Scott is an interesting cat. I did not have on my bingo card that some of the sharpest, most pro-Trump, aggressive, and impactful conservative commentary of the campaign season would be found on CNN. And if I did find it there, I certainly didn't expect it to last more than about a day before it got to headquarters and they said, we've got to fire this guy. It became kind of a bit. I was asking, some Twitter clip would land of Scott just eviscerating some liberal. Sometimes it's a liberal sitting there on the set with him. And yet there seemed to be a convivial air of goodwill. It just seemed like it was kind of working. Well, guess what? We're going to ask him about that. We are going to ask him about that when Scott joins us. He fills in for Mike Gallagher today, but Scott is going to join us. Hang on, so we got a bunch of guests today. Let me share with you exactly how that's going to go. Scott is with us at the top of the third hour. This first hour, Matt Continetti is going to be along, Mary Catherine Ham. Next hour, we're going to welcome Sohrab Ahmari, who is a writer for Compact Mag. He's about to get a new gig. We'll ask him about that in a minute. But he has an article called Smearing Pete Hegseth, which is one of the first things we got to talk about today. The Pete Hegseth nomination is, shall we say, in trouble. My question is, does it deserve to be? Should it be? Anyway, Sohrab Ahmari has some reporting, as the saying goes, that that all these sources who say that Pete did these various dreadful things, these are anonymous sources, these are unreliable sources, these are sources that don't deserve the light of day. Oh, they're getting the light of day in a media culture that absolutely despises Pete Hegseth because they despise Trump. And so the resistance is in full throat, at least in some forms, even though Trump did actually win last time I checked. What in the world in the Middle East? Trump has this wonderful tweet, Trump or Truth Social Post tweet, I don't know, he's on both, essentially saying, hey, release the hostages or there's just going to be all kinds of hell to pay. I love this. This is what an American president should do. This American president, Joe Biden, certainly was not going to do it. Of course, he's not doing much of anything. I love his trip to Africa. It's great. We should probably go to Africa more often, but that's just his way of just vanishing from the news and leaving poor Karine Jean-Pierre out there to answer Hunter pardon questions with the same lack of skill that she's handled everything else. Just, oh my gosh. So, and then you throw in stuff going on in Syria. It's a great day to talk to my friend Jonathan Schanzer, who is the executive director of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, one of the great Middle Eastern anti-terror sort of global think tanks. He'll join us middle of the second hour. Olivia Beavers is here, as per the Wednesday norm, the Politico Congress reporter. You think she's going to have an interesting few weeks and months coming up. We'll talk confirmations and congressional stuff. As I said, Scott Jennings with us at the top of the third hour. And look, I could bring in Scott and talk about Pete Hegseth and talk about Trump nominations. What fun is that? You and I could do that. I can do that with 14 other guests. I want to talk to Scott about what it's like to sit on a set on CNN and light these people up like a Christmas tree to their faces and then hit the break room for coffee. That's my question for Scott Jennings, and we're going to talk about that and probably a few things in the news. And then before we're done, we start the home stretch of the final hour today, I found an article from a gentleman named Chris Edwards, who is at Cato, our libertarian friends at the Cato Institute, which means I agree with them on most things. All right. Well, this is certainly going to be one of them. He's the chair of fiscal studies. And it's funny, the thing I love about libertarians is libertarians make mainstream conservatives look like liberals when it comes to spending. I mean, these people are hardcore on fiscal restraint, and we all should be leaning toward them in that direction. But it's not so much so we'll talk some fiscal stuff and what does Cato want from Trump, which sounds like an old Green Hornet episode. But he actually has an article about green energy waste. Look, I got nothing against alternative energy sources and green stuff and, keeping the planet pristine. I love that. That's great. Want to drive an electric car? Do it. Want to do, have wind farms? Do it. We got a bunch of them here in Texas. You want to do solar panels? Knock yourself out to whatever degree you want to, but no subsidies, no force feeding, no denial of the stuff that you really do want, like coal-fired plants and internal combustion engine cars. Thank you. But one of the big scams that's been running is that green energy is the planet is just so well cared for by all these solar panels and wind farms. First of all, do you know how much fossil fuel you have to burn in order to get to some of these green energy destinations? And secondly, how much trash they generate, how much absolute trash they generate. So Chris Edwards joins us middle of the last hour. Okay, let me take a look at what we've got here. This was CBS Evening News last night. If the Hegseth nomination is in some trouble, it might be because of hostile coverage like this. Get a load is Cut 18. Nora O'Donnell on your CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and we begin with new reporting tonight by CBS News. The highest priority of the President of the United States is the safety and security of the American people. As the commander-in-chief, presidents rely on their defense secretaries to help carry out that solemn task. President-elect Donald Trump wanted a Fox News weekend host to hold that post, the 44-year-old combat veteran Pete Hegseth. But tonight, that nomination appears to be on the rocks. Hegseth is facing new allegations of sexual misconduct and excessive drinking. Tonight, CBS News has learned that Hegseth may not have the support of enough Republican senators to be confirmed for the job, meaning his nomination is in serious jeopardy.
Okay, so we'll put her down as undecided. All this virtue signaling at the front end of a president's most important job is to make sure of course it is. And I have no doubt that Pete Hegseth would be a wonderful defense secretary and be the kind of buzzsaw through Pentagon bloat and waste and corruption that we need. Okay, but can he get there? Is he going to be Kavanaghed or Clarence Thomas to such a degree that he just becomes toxic? And then you go to the Senate, where you do have your Susan Collins, your Lisa Murkowski. Here in my own state of Texas, we got Ted Cruz. We also have John Cornyn, who is hard to read sometimes, shall we say. And you only got 3 senators to lose, even in the new Senate. And so is the Pete Hegseth nomination in trouble? There is buzz that if it is, that there are some replacements waiting in the wings, that Trump has the idea possibly of Ron DeSantis or Joni Ernst, both of which I think would absolutely sail to confirmation. So we'll take a look at that and examine all kinds of things with you today. Bunch of guests. You can join us 1-800-520-1234. We like talking to people too. Hugh is back tomorrow. I want to ask you to do something for Hugh, but what we're really doing it for is a very special group of people. Hugh is back tomorrow, and the very best welcome back gift you can give him is a massive day today in Hugh's annual Angel Tree Christmas campaign. Already, hundreds of listeners have stepped up to donate to Prison Fellowship. This is helping kids with a mom or dad behind bars experience the joy of Christmas. How do we do that? These kids, through no fault of their own, face a Christmas with no presents, no parents, sometimes no hope, but thanks to you, great kids like Joseph here, listen to him, are not forgotten at Christmas time.
I will write to my dad about what happened, and one Christmas gift I got from Angel Tree was a drawing pad. That was my favorite I got. I also got paint and colored pencils. I knew he knew what I wanted, and he got the right thing. My name's Joseph, and I love Angel Tree.
Thank you, young man, and God bless you. And every year, Hugh reaches out to you to help bless these kids through the Angel Tree Christmas program. Here's what you do. Go to HughHewitt.com, click Change a Child's Christmas. HughHewitt.com, click Change a Child's Christmas. The cost? $60 to reach 2 kids through Angel Tree. For that, a boy or girl receives a special Christmas gift, a personalized note from mom or dad, and a Bible. So you can bless 5 kids for $150. You do the math and see how many kids you can bless today. Please go to HughHewitt.com, click on the Change a Child's Christmas banner. You can do it on the phone at 888-206-2764. That's 888-206-2764. Or just text Hewitt to 717-767. That's text Hewitt to 717-767, and we'll send you back a link where you can donate what you want. It's the most blessed season of the year. Bless these kids for us. And let's have Hugh come back and go, whoa, what did those people do when I was away? So let's go to HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas. Thank you so much. Hey, while we got you, conservatives for lower health care costs, election day in the rearview mirror, awesome. Trump's going back to the White House. Fight's not over. We need your help. Conservatives for lower health care costs warning us that Big Pharma and the far left are scrambling to fast-track a big government scheme to eliminate free market forces in health care before the Republicans can take control of the White House and Congress. So this pharma-backed scheme called delinking would hand about $32 billion windfall to the biggest drug companies. And guess who's paying that? Hard-working American consumers, seniors, taxpayers, you, me, but you can help stop it. Stop the big pharma money grab. Go to pharmawindfall.com. Pharmawindfall.com. Congress must reject big pharma's scheme to boost drug company profits, keep drug prices high, undermine competition in healthcare, and hike healthcare costs. Pharmawindfall.com. Mark Davis in for Hugh Hewitt. And you know, if they weren't just asking me on relatively frequent Wednesdays, I would ask for Wednesday because of just the preset guest lineup. And it's just great. I get to talk to Mary Catherine Ham in a couple of minutes. Get to talk to Matt Continetti right now out of the world of Commentary Mag. Matt, great to talk to you again. There are family members I don't see as often as you. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Mark. It's nice to see you. And of course, you have the best bumper music I ever hear in radio, so it's always a pleasure to be on with you as well.
I do have to. Well, thank you so much. I will tell you that I will get pushback from Kurt Schlichter, who fancies himself quite the esoteric bumper music guy. But when he busts out at 5-something in the morning Central Time with the Sex Pistols Anarchy in the UK, I have to lovingly distance. All right, speaking of lovingly distancing, let's talk a little bit about Biden and the pardons. This is all marinated for a few days. You've had a lot to say about it, a lot to tweet about it. Do you count yourself among the people who absolutely knew Biden was always going to do this?
I think I expected Biden to do something about Hunter, considering that it is his son, that Hunter has weighed so heavily on him for years. But I confess I expected him to commute Hunter's sentence once it was registered over the next 2 weeks in the various trials. I was not expecting a full pardon, especially a full pardon, Mark, of this scope. And I think that's what's so striking to me about the pardon statement. is that he's not just pardoning Hunter for the crimes for which a jury found him guilty, the tax evasion crime and the gun charge. He's pardoning Hunter for all crimes he may have committed over a
Hmm.
period of 11 some years. And to me,
Yeah.
that just raises more questions about what Biden has been hiding about his financial relationship with his son, about the overall relationships that we call Biden Inc., the influence peddling that we've known has been going on for decades now inside the Biden family.
Republicans and conservatives have been predictable in their reactions to this. Democrats have been mixed. Of the Democrats who have said this was a bad thing for Biden to do, have they suddenly discovered a conscience, or is it strategic for them because they just know that politically speaking, this gives Trump cover to pardon all the January Sixers or do whatever he wants to do? So, which do you think is the case there?
Well, I think part of that is the case that many Democrats, you know when Democrats are upset about something, Mark, when they say, "Oh, only Trump would do something like that," because for them, in their imagination, Trump is the absolute worst. So when you hear the media say, "Oh, this is something that Trump would do," it means that they're really, really upset at Joe Biden. And you're absolutely right. Now, Trump can come in and say, "I mean, I am going to pardon some of the J6 prisoners because look what Biden did with the scope and breadth of his pardon." I also think, though, that many Democrats are just kind of shell shocked. If you look at Democrats in Washington, D.C. these days, if you see them even on places like MSNBC, they look dazed and confused. I'm not sure they're quite clear on what just happened to them. They had this election where they expected the public to reject Donald Trump. They were so high on their own vibes about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and the progressive future, and all of a sudden the election is called relatively quickly. Trump wins every swing state. Every single part of the country moves toward Trump. Kamala Harris is the first candidate in 90 years not to flip a single county from one election to the other. And so I think many Democrats just don't know what happened to them. And on top of all of this, on top of the rejection from the public, they have this mind boggling pardon, which again, I think many people may not have been surprised, but that doesn't mean they still can't be shocked at the and not only the breadth of the pardon, but also the way that Biden discussed it in the statement. I mean, accusing his own Justice Department of politicization, of lawfare. What does Merrick Garland have to say about this? What do Biden's own employees have to say about this? It's a really remarkable and selfish act. And I think that's why many Democrats just are kind of mind boggled and are saying so many different messages at once.
So, as Democrats engage in obvious introspection, a post mortem on what happened, it's easy to think about what they offer up as a candidate in 2028, but in the midterms of 2026, which they've obviously already got to be thinking about, as we all should, because they'll be here before you know it, will we see a chastened, moderated Democrat Party? Or will they double down on stuff saying that it's not our ideas they didn't like? Maybe Kamala Harris wasn't the greatest candidate, or is it way too early to know what Democrats will do?
Well, it is a little bit early. I will just look back at what happened after 2004. That was the last time the Republican won the popular vote. Last time a Republican was reelected. Though, of course, that was a consecutive term that George W. Bush was
Mhm.
elected to, not Trump's non consecutive term. And the Democrats did feel shell shock similarly. And what they did was pivot. And the candidates they ran in 2006 were much more populist, were much more white working class oriented, much more concerned about middle class issues. Of course, this was the class of senators that included people like John Tester and Sherrod Brown and Bob Casey Jr., all of them, of course, going down this time because they had become so estranged from the public, so aloof from the electorate. Now, can Democrats do the same thing after 2024? I think that's a real question. And I have to say, I think it will be hard for them because over the intervening 20 years, the Democrats have become the party of the establishment. They're the party of the rules. They set the standard, they control so much of the legacy media, and they have basically constructed a cocoon that surrounds himself that gives them nothing but progressive social messaging. I think it'll be hard for the Democrats to break out of that shell, to leave that cocoon, and find candidates who do speak to the new middle class, working class America in the same way that Trump's Republicans do.
I want to have you weigh in on a narrative you can hear on almost any street corner or over coffee these days, and that is that Trump, before he's even president, is doing more than Biden may have done in the last year or two. His energy before the inauguration is changing the world. You can like or dislike tariffs, but here's Mexico doing stuff about the border. Here's Justin Trudeau banging on the door at Mar-a-Lago. Let me in. I want to sit down with you. How much should be made of that?
Well, I think it's remarkable. I think we're living in the Trump moon right now. Donald Trump never had a honeymoon after his first election in 2016. He was immediately hit by the Russia hoax, the Russia collusion fraud, and that really dogged him for the first 2 years and plus of his presidency. Now we have a situation where he won the popular vote. No one is questioning the legitimacy of this election. He is more popular than he's ever been, Mark. He has approval ratings above 50%. That has never been the case with Donald Trump in 10 years in which he's been the central figure in American politics. And he's kind of loving it. And he's there, and he's filling out his cabinet with all of these picks. If he takes a lump on one of them, like Matt Gaetz, well, he comes right back up and goes, okay, here's Pam Bondi. And Pam Bondi looks like she's going to sail through the confirmation process. He's issuing these policies over the Truth Social, which he had talked about the power of tariffs and about how he was about to use tariffs as president. And it's getting real results. And I think that's the most significant change. It's not just that the country has a new attitude toward Trump, Mark. It's that world leaders do too. And this is something that was not the case when he was first elected. You just remember the scowl that was always on Angela Merkel's face, the former German chancellor, whenever she had to deal with Donald Trump. Most people, most foreign leaders acted like the permanent DC establishment when Donald Trump was first elected. They wanted nothing to do with him. They thought he was an outsider, and they thought that they could stop him. They could crush him, and they were wrong. And so what you see now, whether it's Trump's calls with Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, whether you see Justin Trudeau hop on the plane and come down to Mar-a-Lago to have dinner with Trump, whether you see Macron invite Trump to attend the reopening of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and Trump accepting, which will be just a remarkable occasion. It will be wonderful to see Trump there at this pretty glorious restoration from the photos I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
You now see that foreign leaders are accepting the Trump revolution. And I think that is a good sign for the initial stages of his presidency.
Right. A little over 60 seconds. You mentioned the Trump transition and who's going to sail and who's not. Matt Gaetz had to be replaced by Pam Bondi. Is Pete Hegseth going to make it or not?
It looks like this next 24 hours for Pete Hegseth are critical. He has a big interview lined up on Fox today. But so far, I think the senators are beginning to stiffen in their opposition. And that means that Hegseth might have to be replaced as a nominee by the end of the week.
So there's word about possibly Ron DeSantis or Joni Ernst. I would love Joni Ernst. I would love Ron DeSantis, but I kind of have the other plans for him, and that might involve being 48th or 49th president. So what's a bigger deal? He's got a governor of Florida. He's term limited. He's got to go after 2 more years. Trump's defense secretary, does that heal you up with MAGA? 30 seconds on DeSantis as secretary of defense. Does he want that gig?
I think he might be tempted by it. Of course, he has a background in the military and he knows how to run large organizations, and that's what the Pentagon is. I think he'd be a very effective Secretary of Defense, Ron DeSantis, and it could set him up for another presidential run in 2028 or 2032.
And the last thing, follow Matt Continetti on Twitter @Continetti, because you get stuff like this to make me, in my Dallas Cowboys fan status of suffering, understand that it could be worse. This is from Wall Street Journal. Last month, the Cincinnati Bengals became the first team ever to lose back-to-back non-overtime games when their quarterback threw for at least 300 yards with at least 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. And they got Joe Burrow, so I just don't know.
I'm a Burrow fan, and so I'm suffering with you, Mark, for a different team, different reasons.
At least you have a functional quarterback. So, Matt, God bless. Thank you very much. Read Matt there in the world of commentary. As I said, I dig the Wednesday Hewitt thing because look who I get to talk to. That was Matt Continetti. Here's Mary Catherine Ham. Hi, MK. Merry Christmas. How you doing?
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you. We're in the sprint with the kids to December 25th now. There's a lot to do, Mark. There's a lot to do.
Yes, well, I won't keep you. I sense the urgency, but I will borrow you for a few minutes to ask you about a couple of names. I just talked a lot about Pete Hegseth with Continetti, which I'll do with you in a moment. But you had some interesting tweeting, some interesting thoughts. How's the whole Kash Patel thing working out at the FBI?
Yeah, look, so I think Kash Patel is somebody who is obviously more of a bomb thrower, a skull crusher, one might say, that you would send into an agency to reform it. But I'm actually pretty open-minded about that. I saw that the Trump transition agreed with the FBI to have their folks vetted by the FBI, but I actually understand why they were very hesitant to do that. The media has basically edited out the whole part where the agency actually literally used the FISA court improperly to spy on a member of the Trump campaign and transition before. So I don't blame them at all for thinking they need a loyalist and somebody who is tough to go in there and make changes. Now, reading a little bit about some of his ideas, I'm open minded to the idea that he would like to add, for instance, another side of lawyers to argue in front of the FISA court so that each side is represented. Right now, it is fairly one sided, literally one sided. So I'm just open minded about him and would like to hear him answer questions.
I think open-mindedness is a good way to be right now. And I think what people are learning is whether it's Linda McMahon at education or Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, that we're not looking, Trump is not looking for people steeped in the old definition of experience with decades of service on boards and 53 degrees. He's looking for somebody with the spine of a leader, a heart for service, a brain for change to come in and shake up all of these sclerotic bureaucracies. And it looks like there's some folks who like that and some folks who don't.
Exactly. Like, and I'm very open to reform in basically any government agency, up to and including abolishing said agencies. So I feel like I'm pretty willing to listen. But you want somebody who is not just interested in reforming or interested in like sort of gutting an agency, but someone who understands it and has a vision. And so that's the part that I'm looking for when I hear folks answer questions.
Is there a Christmas gift that's being slowly assembled for us that is better than I could have ever dreamed, and that is wokeness in full retreat? You mentioned like a half hour ago on Twitter, I think she's a British actress named Jamila Jamil. Tell me about her, and listen, she's just one little indicator, but an important one. What's
Yes.
going on there?
No, this to me, it popped into my Instagram this morning, and I feel like it's a huge indicator. So there's an author named Africa Brooke. She has a book out called oh, excuse me, I'm gonna lose it. I'll look it up in a second. She's fantastic. She's a great thinker. She became famous by sort of going viral in 2021 with an essay entitled "Why I Left the Cult of Wokeness." She is a Zimbabwe-born British woman, and she was thinking incorrect thoughts. She was willing to put them out there in the world. She was encouraging other people in 2020 and 2021 to be brave and to push back on these cultural winds that they felt bullied by. And I've always admired her. Jamila Jamil, on the other hand, is an actress who is like a sentinel of wokeness. She is the embodiment of the cancellation culture. She's a titan of it. This week, British Vogue featured Africa Brooke, the woman with incorrect thoughts, on the nomination of Jamila Jamil, the captain of wokeness. And the idea that a person like Africa Brooke is being featured in British Vogue at the behest of someone like Jamila Jamil seems very big to me. This is a shift
Would
in the
that book,
culture. Pardon?
no, just would that book be the third perspective, brave
Thank
expression
you.
in the age of intolerance?
Exactly. And she's actually brave and has a record of having been so when it was tougher to say the unapproved thoughts. And so I just think Jamila Jamil probably sees the wind shifting and is like, I need to get on the other side of this. And Africa Brooke is the beneficiary of that, and all of us are the beneficiary of that because now we can honor interesting thinkers and not do this ridiculous cancellation of everything nonsense. So I'm pretty excited about what that indicates about the future.
All right, about 40 seconds. Follow Mary Catherine at MK Hammer on Twitter. 12-team college football playoff. I was skeptical, but I'm actually kind of loving it. How about you?
I am excited. Obviously, the Georgia Bulldogs had an exciting game last week which I attended, 8 overtimes into past midnight, and
Against Tech.
not
Yep.
a pristine win. I'd like to see something a little stronger, but we're going into the SEC championship this weekend. We have to take care of that, but likely in the playoffs regardless. It's been, who can complain about the last 2 weeks of college football? I mean, it's been
Correct.
fantastic.
Correct.
I will side with all the folks who are like, oh, they're just going to put Alabama in all over all these other people with equally good
Well, they
records
are.
or better.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Forever,
Very
for all
Catherine,
time.
God bless you, MK. We'll talk a little Bulldogs Longhorns next time we talk, because that is coming up. I am Mark Davis, filling in for Hugh Hewitt. He will be back in the chair tomorrow, fresh off his front half of filling in on the Dennis Prager cruise. Our buddy Mike Gallagher takes over from here. 1 hour from now, the gentleman who fills in for Mike Gallagher today, but we're going to borrow him a little bit first. You might have seen him. You might have heard him. Yeah, it's that incredible conservative you see on CNN. What? Scott Jennings joins us to explain how that even happened. That's an hour from now. Right now, we find ourselves starting a morning which has so much stuff in the news. There's Supreme Court news. There is a transgender case where Tennessee will be walking the point for, I think, about 26 states, including my state of Texas, who boldly believe that a state ought to be able to say no to these monstrous, evil, misguided surgeries that shred the bodies of children on the altar of transgender lunacy. Listen, you can feel however you want about that. I think I've telegraphed my thoughts about it. But there should be no question that a state should be able to determine. It's kind of like abortion. You can feel how you want on abortion right now. If it ain't in the Constitution, states get to do what they want. How in the world can you tell a state that it cannot protect children from this outrage? So that's some of what's coming up in the news. One of the first things you'll see all over the news this morning is the Pete Hegseth nomination doomed? If it is, should it be? In preparation for filling in for Hugh, I just always go looking for stuff that's interesting that people have written and ask Danielle, hey, can you get this person? And her success rate is amazing. And it's a real pleasure to meet Sohrab Ahmari, who wrote a piece in Compact Mag called Smearing Pete Hegseth. Mr. Ahmari, welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. How you doing?
Mark, it's good to be back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Listen, and let's look at your changing business card. Is this the last thing you're doing for Compact as you go join a very interesting group of Brits at Unheard, H-E-R-D, as in don't follow the herd, as their U.S. editor? Tell me about that.
Yes, I co-founded Compact Magazine in 2022. Before that, of course, I was at News Corp for a decade at the Wall Street Journal editorial page and the opinion editor of the New York Post. Then I founded Compact for 3 years. It's become an institution, and as co-founders can often do once their baby has become an institution, I'm leaving to launch the US edition of Unheard. As you said, it's a UK publication, and it's in that heterodox space where we publish any viewpoint, whether it's from the left or right, as long as it makes a good argument.
Well, it's funny. I was going to say, I figured I'd go check on that, and I was going to ask, are you on board with all the? But that's a stupid question, because you can find all kinds of things. I found conservative things. There's a guy up front who on unheard.com right now who just really does not like Tulsi Gabbard, and I read it. I didn't think I agreed with it, but I found it compelling, and I think that seems to be where the place. So good luck there at Unheard. Now, as you hit the exits at Compact Mag, Smearing Pete Hegseth is your piece. And it just looks like he's going down in flames. The drinking, the mistreatment of women, the mismanagement of the CVA. Except you have said, quoting, in interviews with me, 2 former senior leaders of CVA have denied the whistleblower allegations. So tell me what you think is going on here.
So look, I can't speak to Pete Hegseth's entire career. There have been allegations made about him about various stages of his life. But the most damning thing I think that's been out there is this essay in the New Yorker by Jane Mayer that lays out claims made against him in a so-called whistleblower memo about his time as president of the Concerned Veterans of America. And you can read it for yourself. Just brief summary. It's that he would be drunk and very publicly drunk, lewd, obnoxious, manhandling strippers, going to strip clubs. And on that one, I happen to have spoken to two senior former leaders of Concerned Veterans of America who overlapped with Mr. Hegseth, and both of them categorically denied these allegations. They said that this just simply was not the case, that they were there for many of these alleged incidents. They were then and there, and Pete was not doing the things that he's alleged to have done. And that this was that memo that was put together and sent to the leadership of CVA was put together by three people whom Mr. Hegseth had fired or dismissed because they weren't doing their jobs, and that there was that he did not leave under pressure, contrary to what the New Yorker said. He left of his own accord. That it wasn't, the New Yorker says that he just didn't have a job lined up. He left in a kind of desperate situation. In fact, as they pointed out, he was already becoming a pretty frequent Fox News contributor and was in negotiations to become a full-time anchor of Fox and Friends at that time. And soon after, he did become an anchor. And as you know, you don't become an anchor. It's not like a thing you just get the offer. It's a long-term kind of conversation interview process. So he clearly had something lined up. He also was being potentially poached by other networks at the same time. So at least as far as the Concerned Veterans of America period is concerned, there's good reason to doubt the allegations made against him.
So this may come as a shock to some, but somebody is lying through their teeth. And the he said, they said, Clarence Thomas, Justice Kavanaugh. This happens a lot when things get contentious. If Pete Hegseth goes down in flames, it'll be for one of two reasons. Either he deserves to because that past is just too tricky and too toxic, or he has been successfully torpedoed by malicious people who just cannot stand the reforms that he promises to bring. Which do you think? I mean, listen, I hope he makes it, but which of those negative scenarios do you think is more likely?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have sources who tell me things are not looking good for his nominee. Or at least it's looking like a very uphill battle. Look, it's a combination. We have to be honest. As those sources that I mentioned, they told me, like, look, Pete is not a saint. He hasn't been a Boy Scout, and like a lot of, he's a sinner. But that the volume of mud that's being flung at him is in part, or maybe in large part, because he is challenging a kind of military industrial complex mentalities, which he, as a veteran, feels led to the disasters of the post 9/11 wars. Pete Hegseth, as a public advocate, is often known for his work for Veterans for Freedom, a different organization, which was a very hawkish, Bill Kristol style, stay the course in Iraq type organization. But you have to keep in mind that was like more than a decade ago. Since then, his views, I've been told, have evolved, and he's less of that kind of militarist hawk. And he is also not in the pocket of the major defense contractors. So he wants a shakeup, and that's that shakeup. He's not there. Many secretaries of state and deputies and so on are very close. They go in and out like revolving door between the Pentagon and the defense contractors. Hegseth is not that. So he's a populist choice. The American people elected a populist president, and populists are disruptive. They bring in people you wouldn't expect. And when he was first tapped, I was kind of puzzled. But the more I learn about him, the more I'm like, well, this actually reflects what people want of the Trumpian agenda, which won a decisive, election just a month ago. So
that they did.
Yeah.
With a couple of minutes real quick, because just a couple of minutes, because I want to give you time, because you've been paying attention to another interesting pick, Lori Chavez DeRemer, whom Elizabeth Warren might kind of like, and so does Josh Hawley. Is she too pro-labor to be in the Trump cabinet? Is this kind of a triangulation? What do you make of her pick, and where do you think that's going?
No, I think she's fantastic. So I should say, we at Compact published an op-ed by Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, endorsing her, and it was the most notable endorsement. And a day later, she got the nomination. So I'm personally very proud of that. But I'm an unusual conservative. I think in the private economy, the labor union movement is good. People need collective bargaining. When you're up against, when you're just the sole employee up against the large employer, you band together with your fellow workers to press for better wages. That's very That's very American. It's very old. And the labor movement in this country, the private economy labor movement, has good things to offer. So it's in line with Trump's promises. He got close to the Teamsters and he delivered for them. There are also plenty of libertarian picks that are more hostile to labor organizations. So he's kind of serving different constituencies, but this is an important one to serve because the Republican Party's base is increasingly working class. The best way we have to decide that is non-college educated Americans. That's the best polling proxy we have. And those are going overwhelmingly for the Republican Party. And so that their views, including those of them that are members of unions, should be reflected in this new working class Republican Party.
Sohrab, thank you so much, and best of luck at Unheard, and I look forward to talking to you in some format on some show. God bless you, sir, and thanks for being with us today. Sohrab Ahmari, incoming U.S. editor there at Unheard, UNHERD, as in don't follow the herd. Get it? Let me take a look at some things here in the Christmas season that deserve our attention. And Hugh is back in the studio tomorrow morning. And the very best welcome back we can give him is to have him return and say, what did that fill-in boy do to get so many people to pony up for Angel Tree? The Angel Tree Christmas campaign is the stuff of legend. Already, so many of you have stepped up to donate to Prison Fellowship. This is the group that helps kids with a mom or dad behind bars experience the joy of Christmas. I want you to hear Joseph. Wonderful kids like Joseph who are not forgotten on Christmas.
I will write to my dad about what happened. And one Christmas gift I got from Angel Tree was a drawing pad. That was my favorite I got. I also got paint and colored pencils. I knew he knew what I wanted, and he got the right thing. My name's Joseph, and I love Angel Tree.
Joseph's dad is in prison. That is not Joseph's fault, and Joseph deserves a great Christmas, and Angel Tree helped. How many kids can you help today? Your donation can literally change a child's life. Go to HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas, because that's what you're about to do. $30, you do that for a kid. $60, you do it for 2 kids. $150, 5 kids. That's where my math skills stop. You just do that to whatever degree of generosity you can. Go to HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas. Or do the whole thing on the phone, 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764, or text Hewitt to 717-767. Text Hewitt to 717-767. We'll send you a link and you can donate there. Thank you so much. Imagine a boy or girl getting a gift, a personal note from mom or dad, and a Bible, all through Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree program. Go to HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas. While I have you, my friends at Americans for Prosperity made a big difference this year. Did you notice? AFP volunteers made millions of voter contacts. It's mind-blowing. They are the biggest, most effective ground game operation in the country to defend and advance the conservative movement. But now that the election is behind us, the hard work of turning electoral victory into policy, that's where these policy victories are vital, and the grassroots army with Americans for Prosperity will again be in the thick of it. We have an incredible opportunity this coming year to get the country back on track, but it means we are all going to have to roll up our sleeves and get to work. So if you are ready to join a winning team, making a difference across the country, check out my friends at AFP. Learn more at americansforprosperity.org, americansforprosperity.org. Check them out. They're wonderful. And check this out. When the liberal mayor of New York says, I dare you to cancel me for working with Tom Homan, the first one I'm going to give you is this is cut 2 of Eric Adams talking about what Biden and Harris did to his city with illegal immigration.
The long-term impact of what we did to this city is you're going to see it materialize in administrations in the future. They hurt the future of New York City. And when people hear me say $6.4 billion, they may say, well, okay, it's just $1 billion here, $1 billion there. No, we didn't invest in seniors the way we should have, and young people the way we should have. We're not going out to get these chronic absentee students the way we should have. The crimes that we witnessed, This impacted our city, and people don't seem to understand why were you fighting so hard for this? Because I reflected on that 11-year-old boy that was denied, and I went into government to stop these 11-year-old boys, and I came up with a plan to do so, and the federal government made me take $6.4 billion out of providing these services that we all should be angry at what happened to our city under this administration.
Do you feel like there's change in the wind? Does it feel like everything is changing from American cities to the entire world? Let's look at the Middle East. We're checking out a lot of things around the country, around the world. I'm really serious. I'm not just asking this as a rhetorical or musical question. Is the world changing? It feels like it is, and Trump's not even president yet. So one of the things that's always going to be vital is the Middle East. And when I think Middle East, I think about one of the best think tanks over the FDD, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. And a good friend of mine, Jonathan Schanzer, is there. And it used to take half the segment to introduce him because he had a big, long business card, associate director of this particular thing, whatever. Well, it's a lot more compact now because since we last spoke, Mr. Schanzer is now the executive director of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. A, congratulations. And B, welcome. Merry Christmas. Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
So I take a look at the Trump post that essentially says, hey, terrorists, you better release every single one of those hostages by the time my hand comes off the Bible at 12:01, January 20th, or there's going to be hell to pay. Is this bold, robust, strong policy, or just kind of political theater saber rattling?
I think it might be all of the above, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think if we look at what the Biden administration has done for the last 14 months, their rhetoric has been, well, we're just trying to get all sides to agree to give up these hostages. We're trying to bring about an end to this crisis. We're hoping that calm can prevail. These are not the words of a superpower. These are not the words of a country that is trying to take control or that is taking control of a volatile region. I have a colleague, Mariam Wahba, who tweeted something out the other day, which I thought was profound. She said, President Trump speaks Arabic. And that's exactly the way I think we ought to look at this. He issued an ultimatum to the region. They're not used to seeing such blunt rhetoric, especially over the last 14 months. I think it jarred some. I think it scared some. I hope right now that Hamas is scared. I hope that its patrons in Iran are scared. I think they should be, given what we're seeing from the incoming Trump administration personnel. But I also think that there are some countries that should be on notice here too. The countries of Turkey and Qatar, they've played a dangerous double game, pretending to be American allies while all the while supporting Hamas. I think everyone here right now should be reconsidering their positions. And I get the sense that we may see this thing wrapped up, at least parts of it anyway, before Trump swears in. The only issue that I'll just flag is that I'm not sure that there's any one person in Hamas right now that knows where all the hostages are. It's total chaos over there. But I would bet on a bunch of them being released before Trump comes in if they know what's good for them.
Those were my thoughts as well. I thought, even if it is political theater, it's effective political theater. It can sometimes seem condescending to say kind of what we're talking about here is like, well, he's talking to them in a language they understand. But he is talking to them in a language they understand. I mean, it actually is true. So let me ask you this. If indeed they're shaking in their boots at Hamas HQ, what can America do to them militarily that Israel has not already done?
Well, I think that's a good point. And I actually don't see that there's that much that the U.S. would even be willing to do vis-a-vis Hamas, right? I mean, Hamas is eviscerated. We're talking about 23 out of 24 brigades in Gaza destroyed, all the above ground infrastructure gone, thousands of fighters killed. There's not much left to pick apart here. The Israelis are doing what they need to do. But I think, first of all, giving the Israelis the unequivocal support will be important. We're not seeing that from the Biden administration. They've been sort of hemming and hawing about whether they should be giving the Israelis the weaponry they need and the political support that they need, the intelligence that they need. I think we've just equivocated too much. too often here, and I think that has not deterred Hamas. But then I think we have some questions, that can be answered rather quickly. Are we going to start targeting the regime in Iran? Are we going to start looking for ways to bring down that regime so long as they destabilize the Middle East? You got to remember, Iran is responsible for a large part of what has been happening here. They are the key patrons. They're the key people who've been training and arming up Hamas and Hezbollah, for that matter. Also, the Houthis in Yemen that have been targeting American personnel in the Red Sea, the Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. All of these guys are bad actors, and it all tracks back to Iran. We can put maximum pressure on the regime immediately. We can take steps to bring it down. And then on top of that, we've got the financial pressure that we can bring to some of Hamas's other patrons, whether that's Turkey or Qatar or Algeria or Malaysia. There's a lot that I think the U.S. can do almost on day one to start to put significant pressure on all the bad actors that have brought us to this really horrible point in the Middle East.
Last thing, what in the world is going on in Syria? Just in the last 24 hours, the U.S. says it has carried out airstrikes against Iranian militias in Syria. So many moving parts. What is the deal in Syria right now?
Well, in short, I've been saying this is like the movie Alien versus Predator. We're looking at two really bad actors, two bad sides squaring off. The story is that basically for the last 6-7 years, the Syrian civil war has been simmering on a very low flame, barely perceptible to the human eye. For those that watch it closely, they'd say, sure, there's moves that have been going on, but we're not talking about significant chunks of territory being captured. Then all of a sudden, over Thanksgiving weekend, we see this group, HTS as it's known, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They're an al-Qaeda affiliate sponsored by the Turks and the Qataris. They take Syria's second largest town of Aleppo. They take it from the Assad regime, which is, of course, a dictatorship that is supported, backed, and armed by the Iranian regime and by the Russians. If that all sounds confusing, it should be, right? So you got Shiite militias that are there backing up the Assad regime, and then you've got Al-Qaeda and other radical groups trying to target it. Like I said, this is an alien versus predator type scenario. To quote Henry Kissinger, it's a pity both sides can't lose. We can try to contain this conflict. We should try to contain this conflict and make sure that no one runs away with too much territory or too much power, because I got to tell you, I don't want to see the Assad regime win. I don't want to see Al-Qaeda win. I don't want to see Turkish or Qatari-backed Sunni jihadis win. I don't want to see the Russians gain from this. I really can't think of one actor that I'd like to see coming away with even a shred of victory. So we've got our work cut out for us. This is going to be, I think, a pretty messy situation for the Trump administration to inherit. I do think that it is part and parcel of what's been going on in the Middle East. The Israelis have degraded Hezbollah, who, by the way, have been known to fight in this conflict as well. They've degraded the Shia militias in Syria. I think the Al-Qaeda guys sensed a shift in momentum, a shift in power, so they seized the initiative. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. should be happy about this. So we've got some containing to do. We've got some strategizing to do. This is going to be messy, so buckle up.
Jonathan Schanzer is the executive director now of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Follow him at Jay Schanzer and FDD there on Twitter. God bless, Jonathan. Congrats on the new gig, Alien versus Predator. That's the kind of smart clarity that you can bring to some Middle East analysis from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Nobody ever pretended that with the ascendancy of Trump that every trouble spot in the world would simply calm down and everything would be like a walk in the park. But if there are going to be trouble spots in the world, and there are, and they will be many, and they will be complicated, thank God grown-ups are back in charge. So we got a couple of minutes. Let's take a look at some snippets of just media moments for the ages. There's a woman named Lee McGowan. I think she has a podcast called Politics Girl. Okay. She's on CNN with Abby Phillip. They're talking about the Hunter pardon and why that kind of had to happen.
But wasn't, to Scott's point, I mean, wasn't it a lie? I mean, you can defend it, but wasn't it a lie that he was not going to pardon him?
No, I believe the circumstances have changed. I think that we now have a president coming into office who's talking about firing squads, who's talking about running people around the country and making sure that everyone who's his enemy is going to be punished. And Hunter Biden lied about his drug use on a government form when he was buying a gun. And he failed to file and pay taxes when he was a drug addict. He paid back those taxes with interest. Donald Trump himself was indicted for 17 counts of criminal tax fraud, more than Hunter, and he's going to be the president of the United
11
States.
years.
So
You're missing a few things here. 11 years,
pardon. Full and unconditional pardon.
Oh my. A couple of reasons there. Just first of all, Lee McGowan in full meltdown. And did you notice the guy on the left? That's Scott Jennings. Some of the sharpest conservative commentary in cable is coming from CNN. Go figure. He's going to join us at the top of the next hour. I think I get time for this. Admiral James Stavridis, frequently on MSNBC. This is him on radio on WABC in New York, talking about how we're already cut 6 now, seeing the Trump effect.
John, let's start with the pretty obvious impact of the coming Trump presidency around the world. And I'll hit it in 3 key areas. One is the Middle East. You see Iran pulling back. They're concerned. They're nervous. They ought to be. Team Trump will take a very aggressive stance toward Tehran. And by the way, the Iranian air defenses were crushed by the Israelis in the most recent strikes. So what that means is that in the fight that Israel continues to have with Hezbollah to the north of Israel in Lebanon, you're seeing Hezbollah willing to go to a ceasefire. I think that's a direct result of the presence of a new Trump administration coming on.
All righty, let us pivot to the world of Politico. Olivia Beavers with the best job title you could possibly have right now, congressional correspondent. Do you think you're going to have a busy few weeks? Do you think it's going to get a little interesting in your world? Just for example, what will you be doing today? Just go.
Well, even at 9 a.m., the House GOP conference meets. And I think that on the Hill, you're going to have Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk coming and talking to members about DOJA and how they expect the House to kind of work with them on that issue. And then we have a series of other kind of big meetings, especially in the Senate, of different picks of Donald Trump trying to get confirmed. And so we're, chasing after different senators and trying to get them to answer what they think, if they have questions. As you probably can tell, multiple Republican senators do not want to have a public clash with Donald Trump. So if they have an issue with the nomination, like they did with Matt Gaetz, they're privately trying to channel it to suggest, hey, this guy's not going to work. Please pull him before we even have to take a floor vote. And then the balls can get rolling where there's some saving face. There's a large looming question whether Pete Hegseth can get confirmed. But I think some of the other people who, at least some of the senators have raised concerns with, look like they have a little bit more of a smoother path, especially as, Hegseth and Gaetz sort of meet this resistance. It makes it sometimes a little bit easier for those other ones that they have questions with. But yes, to answer your question, I like to joke that I have 2 bags under my eyes, the Chanel and YSL. And to be fair, I don't own either of those designers, but that's how these are going to be staying on my face for the time being.
Well, you look marvelous going about these magnificent tasks, and it's got to be just challenging for absolutely anybody. Let me ask you about scheduling. We've got I think there are 30-ish total people who need to be confirmed by the Senate. That's a lot of committees before you get to floor votes. How do these even get scheduled, and when do they begin?
I think that they're going to be trying to hit the ground running, especially after the first few days of January. But I don't have entire insights into that. I know at least on the House side, they're going to be releasing their schedule into next year today. So I think we're going to be getting some clarity in the next couple of weeks of what the early months of January look like.
Gotcha. And you've covered a lot of these things, and you've seen some nominations, some picks dangle in the breeze and survive. Some others where you just got to cut your losses and be done. Matt Gaetz, I think, looked doomed pretty quickly as it came back fairly efficiently. I think J.D. Vance reported back to Donald Trump, the votes just aren't there. I don't think we're there yet on Hegseth, but last night NBC has this big smear piece about 10 current and former Fox staffers, all of them anonymous, of course, Will Cain and Rachel Campos Duffy coming forward and saying that it's total BS. So it's a lot of they said. How have the next few hours are big for Pete. How have the last 24 hours struck you in terms of the health and vibrancy of his nomination?
I think if you're already seeing other names being floated, which in this case, the Wall Street Journal just reported that Ron DeSantis is a plan B. If you're already talking about plan B, it means that you're losing focus on plan A. So I don't think that that's a good sign. And the fact that DeSantis and Trump, as reported by a reporter named Mark Caputo, who's heading to Axios, he said the two of them have talked. So if that discussion's already happening, it looks like a pretty strong sign that maybe there are doubts that Hegseth can get through. But he is expected to go on Fox News and talk with his mom and try to do, I guess, one final last-ditch effort to try to kind of counter all the allegations coming against him. But there have been sort of different senators who have shifted their perspectives and saying, dismissing the allegations to saying that they needed to be careful and review them. So I wouldn't take that as a good sign for him. I think in the case of like someone like Kash Patel, there are different feelings. Some want to, question him on whether he has the experience to be leading the FBI. I actually know Kash Patel because I used to cover the House Intelligence Committee back during the Russia investigation. And so he was a very high level staffer for Devin Nunes. And so he was on the kind of front lines of the GOP pushing back against the Russia investigation way back in the day. And I think that that's where his name really kind of cropped up for Trump world. And I think that he has, an easier path than Hegseth, but he also hasn't had his intense day in the sun making the circles with different senators.
Indeed. Covering the congressional world, Olivia Beavers. Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate you very much. We'll be following you, reading you that there at Politico. Olivia_Beavers on Twitter. It's always great being here for Hugh. He will be back tomorrow. Here are the multiple moving four-dimensional parts of the hosting gig. I'm here for Hugh because he's on the front half of the Dennis Prager cruise. Mike Gallagher is taking care of the back half as we pray for Dennis's continued recovery. We appreciate your prayers in conjunction with ours. The great Scott Jennings of recent CNN fame is going to fill in for Mike today. So I'm sitting here getting ready to fill in for Hugh, and I thought, hey, here's an idea. Let's see if we can bust into some of Scott's show prep and say hi to him right here and talk a little bit about his interesting last few months. Scott Jennings, what a joy to meet you, sir, and thanks. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great and appreciate being on with you. They've gone to the bullpen. They've gone to get the big arms out of the bullpen. You and me today. This is going to be a lot of fun guest hosting here for the legend Mike Gallagher, and I know you're think the same about Hugh. It's really an amazing honor to be here.
Well, we're enormously glad to have you here in Salem land. And look, there's so much going on in the actual news, and we'll get to it here in a minute. You'll be covering that on the Gallagher Show, and you've covered it in such great detail on CNN. I want to pull the curtain back a little bit and just ask what people have been asking me, because as a talk show guy, I'm a big fan of my own commentary, of course, but I go looking for other things that people say that I agree with or disagree with. And as the campaign season wore on, it became clear that some of the sharpest, most impactful conservative commentary, and I love my friends at Fox and Newsmax, I love all people, but it was you, and it was on CNN. How did you get that gig, and how in the world have you kept it?
Well, it's a great question. I've actually been with the network for over 7.5 years. And, it's funny, you go through waves in the news cycle and stuff comes and goes. But this particular reelection campaign or election campaign for Donald Trump, it was different than 2020, where we were all kind of stuck inside and it wasn't a real campaign. We weren't out doing stuff and doing the normal cable news thing. But this time around, we had the debate in the summer, we had the conventions, and it just gave me this huge opportunity to represent, half of America. I mean, that's basically what I felt like I was doing every day. I mean, cable news is certainly got, the 50% of America that didn't vote for Donald Trump, or a little less than that. They got plenty of representatives, but there aren't that many people who represent the other half of us. And I just took that opportunity to speak for the people, and to try to bring some clarity and some sanity to some of the political analysis that was going on, that I was hearing on a regular basis. And I have to say, CNN's treated me very well. They never censor me. They never tell me what to say. They never rein it in. They just say, give me your authentic views based on your values and your experience. That's the only advice I've ever gotten. I took that to heart, and I tried to put it to work in what I think was one of the most important campaigns in modern political history.
No doubt. As a conservative talk radio guy, I slap CNN around all the time, but I want to join you in that sentiment of thanking them for having you. And you are half of America, but sometimes about 15 or 20% of a given panel. So what's the dynamic like? It looks, and I hope this is true, like you're able to just give as good as you get and slap people around rhetorically and then hit the break room for a coffee. Is the vibe still pretty good?
It is a good vibe, but there's a lot of camaraderie in this. I mean, not everybody is golfing buddies or anything, but for the regular CNN people that you see, like David Axelrod, for instance, Barack Obama's chief strategist, he and I have become really good friends, and we spend a lot of time together in New York City. We walk all over this island together. We talk about elections and talk about our war stories and talk about what's going on in the world. Those kinds of valuable relationships, I think it spills over onto the air, because we can have very vigorous debates, and goodness knows David and Ax and I have gone after each other on TV, but it's not personal. We both deeply care about the country, and I think that's the message we're trying to convey, is that you can deeply care about politics and about the future of the country and not hate the people that you're debating. I think that makes for the best television, is when you have that camaraderie, but covered by people who are strong enough in their views and confident enough in their views to not pull their punches. So you get an authentic debate between two people who genuinely respect each other. To me, it makes great TV, and I think it made for great commentary during the election. So good vibes in CNN.
You bet.
Even though there's a few more of them than me.
Yes, you are clearly outnumbered to steal the name of a Fox show. A little bit about your journey. It's been an interesting one. You're in your 20s and you're doing stuff for Bush and you're doing stuff for McConnell. These are two names, two brands that I won't say they've fallen completely out of favor. George W. Bush was my governor when you were in college. Conservatives owe a lot to the Bush family for their heart for service. We owe a lot to Mitch McConnell for keeping that Supreme Court seat open. But I don't think it'll come as a shock to you that the Bush world hates Trump world. I don't know what McConnell world thinks of Trump world. As somebody who sort of cut his teeth in the Bush and McConnell realms, who probably did more than almost anybody else in media to help the Trump cause, help me triangulate that and those relationships as the Republican Party changes before our eyes.
Well, for me, as a young guy coming out of college, Mitch McConnell was my mentor. He's the one who recruited me into politics in the first place. I went to work on the 2000 Bush campaign at the behest of Mitch McConnell. And really all I've ever known from my professional career is it's better to have more Republicans in office than not. And Bush was our standard bearer, and I think he's a great man and a great American. And Mitch McConnell, I think, has been the most consequential Senate leader of either party in American history. And as you said, he saved the Supreme Court, and I think holding that seat open in 2016 helped deliver Donald Trump to the presidency. And he and Donald Trump did great things together. They're obviously not friends today, but they did do great conservative things together. And so when I'm looking at my own, situation here, I think like a lot of Republicans, who voted for different kinds of Republicans over the years, I'm looking at it broadly. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to advance a conservative cause. We're trying to save Western civilization. We're trying to stand up for core values that we've all believed in, no matter what wing of the party you've come from, we all do share some basic values. And I just think most Republicans have more in common than they have differences. And I have no trouble at all supporting Donald Trump for re-election this year. I talked about it on CNN. I wrote about it in a big piece for the LA Times. He's like a lot of politicians. I don't agree with him 100% of the time, but I don't know that there's one that I do. But I know this. He's a Republican. He's a conservative. He believes in America, and he doesn't believe this country's rotten at its core, which I do think the American left believes. And it was easy choice for me to support someone who I knew could do the job and put us back on track versus Harris, who not only was the worst vice president we've ever had, but I have no doubt would have been the worst president we would have ever had.
And was I believe, the worst candidate in modern times. Okay, about 2 minutes, Scott. Let's do some show prep. I think you're going to talk about Pete Hegseth today. Is that nomination doomed, and should it be?
Well, it's an interesting question. He's in trouble. I mean, there's no doubt. If you read the news and look at the tea leaves in Washington, D.C., he's in trouble. Now, he's doing some media this morning on Fox with his mom. And the New York Times, got a hold of this story, this letter from his mom, which I thought was kind of outrageous that they published private correspondence between a mother and a son. But I guess that's neither here nor there now. It was already in the paper. But he's got some work to do. He needs an advocate. He's got a lot of people piling on him right now, but he needs an advocate. So I'd say he's in trouble right now. And obviously, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Trump is floating replacements. Whatever happens to him, I've said this from the beginning. He's a hero. Served his country 20 years, went in the theater of war, 2 Bronze Stars. I mean, this man served his country, and I don't like the way he's being dragged right now by a lot of detractors. We'll see how the process plays out, but he's definitely got work to do.
And it was similar, maybe not similar, somewhat less challenge for Kash Patel. I think the common thread here is these are disruptors, these are reformers, and the establishment in both parties fears that. How do you think Kash Patel is going to do at FBI?
I actually think he is in good shape this morning. My instincts are he's doing well so far, and senators have an open mind to him because I think a lot of Republicans believe we need serious reforms at the Department of Justice. So whether you're talking about Pam Bondi for AG now or Kash Patel for his position, I mean, people believe we need reform. There's some polling that came out this week, the lack of confidence right now in this national federal law enforcement. It's bad. We need that agency to be trusted. It's not trusted right now. And so when you have a trust deficit, what do? You get an outsider, you get a reformer, you get somebody who's willing not to just do it the same way we've always been doing it, because what we've been doing now has led to a lack of trust. So I think that nomination's actually in pretty good shape this morning. It's early, but he's got a great chance, I think.
Well, I'm going to get out of your way because you got a pretty important gig coming up. As an ambassador for Salem, let me welcome you to our world as a guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. And coming up in not even an hour, the host of the Mike Gallagher Show here on Salem News Channel and along the network. But Scott, God bless you. And thank you, CNN, for employing you, because it just makes the network better. And you've made our show better today. God bless you, buddy. Thank you.
It's an ambitious crossover, CNN and Salem. I love it.
Yes, it is. Anything's possible. Truly, anything is possible. The great Scott Jennings. Got some thoughts on Trump 2.0 and media. But first, let me put a thought into your head as we're just enjoying a delicious day of guest visits. And we ain't even done yet. And we're always glad to be here for Hugh. Much appreciated. Hugh's back tomorrow. And when he comes back, this is something we can do. Let's have him come back and look at the totals of what you and I did today for this Angel Tree campaign and just have his eyes go like, wow, what happened? So let's make some magic here together. You know what the Angel Tree campaign is. Hundreds of you have already stepped up to donate to Prison Fellowship. Prison Fellowship helps kids already are having a tough spot in life because their mom or dad is behind bars, mom or dad in prison. So that's great around the holidays, right? So these kids, through no fault of their own, face a Christmas filled with challenges and not necessarily filled with presents and hope. But thanks to you, I want you to hear one particular kid that's just like the ones that you're about to help. Listen to Joseph.
I will write to my dad about what happened. And one Christmas gift I got from Angel Tree was a drawing pad. That was my favorite I got. I also got paint and colored pencils. I knew he knew what I wanted, and he got the right thing. My name's Joseph, and I love Angel Tree.
And Joseph, we love you. And I want you to show your love for so many kids helped by Prison Fellowship by getting for them a note from mom or dad, personalized, a gift, and a Bible. So it's $30. It's $30 to do this for a kid. $60, 2 kids, 150, 5 kids. You do the math. And how many kids can you help today? How many Christmases can you change? Go to HughHewitt.com, HughHewitt.com, and click Change a Child's Christmas. Let's blow the roof off this campaign right here and have Hugh come back and go, holy cow, let's keep this running. So here are the ways to do it. HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas, or you can do the whole thing by phone, 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764, or just text Hewitt to 717-767. Text Hewitt to 717-767. Shoot you back a link, and you can give what you wish. Thank you so very, very much. I thank you. Hugh thanks you. These kids are really going to thank you. HughHewitt.com and click Change a Child's Christmas. All right, hey, if you're looking to change a little bit of your portfolio, looking to heavy up on some gold and silver, which is a good idea. Diversified portfolios are a smart idea. They're just good reasons to buy gold and silver. Bank failures, digital currency volatility, emerging market countries trying to topple the dollar. So AmFed Coin and Bullion. You hear Hugh talk about them, and with good reason. They're your precious metals people. If you ask AmFed owner Nick Grovich to simplify the case for precious metals, he will tell you, when President Roosevelt recalled the gold in circulation, paid people with paper money, they got a $20 bill for a $20 gold piece. Yeah, how's that working out? Today, that $20 bill won't even fill half of your gas tank, but the gold piece, you're looking at about $2,600. Which would you rather own? AmFed Coin and Bullion. Nick's been in the industry over 42 years, proud of providing transparency and fair pricing to build trusted relationships. So if you're interested in buying or selling some gold, silver, precious metals, call Nick and his team, AmFed Coin and Bullion, 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694. Pardon me. AmericanFederal.com, AmericanFederal.com. So there we go. All right, so media in the world of Trump 2.0. Is MSNBC going to go away? Will the dominant media culture, the legacy media, crumble to their knees and say, oh, how sorry we've been? That's a no. That's going to be a no. Will they moderate? Will they temper themselves? Will they engage in some brand adjustments and self-editing in order to remain relevant in Trump's universe? Yes, they will. Trump will still have loud and vociferous critics, but maybe there'll be more networks looking for a Scott Jennings to plug in. Not a bad thing. As I fill in for Hugh, I always go looking for interesting stuff that I've tripped over or read or run across, and then I throw it to Danielle and say, hey, can you find this person? And boy, she's just batting like, if it's possible to bat over 1,000, she has done so today. And one that I found was from Chris Edwards over at Cato, and it was about green energy and how maybe it's not exactly the greenest thing in the world. So let's talk about that and some good Cato-flavored reduction of the size of government stuff with Chris Edwards of Cato. Welcome, sir. It's nice to have you. Good morning.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Mark.
So I think it's been a fairly familiar narrative, as people have said. You never know how much fossil fuels you actually need to put green energy online. And you've brought a different angle in a piece in National Review called "Green Energy is Not So Green." And I'll start it and hand you the baton. When we've got all of this hardware, these solar panels and massive wind turbine blades lying around, where do they go? And there's a lot of what you might call green energy trash. So how's that working out?
That's right, Mark. My new piece on National Review, I decided to look into these massive Biden-era subsidies for green energy and found out they're not really green in so many ways. So, for example, as you touched on, solar power, the solar panels, the wind turbine blades, lithium batteries, there's going to be a massive amount of trash and is starting in a number of years for all of those items because they only last 10 or 20 years. And then they're not recycled. Windmill blades are made of fiberglass, not recycled. Lithium batteries, not recycled. Solar PV panels, not recycled. So there's going to be massive piles and landfills of all those supposedly green energy source products. Then there's the issue of land area, which just blew my mind. You know, fossil fuel plants or nuclear power plants, you can generate power with very little land area. But windmills, of course, take up this vast area of land, and so do solar PV panels. So the Biden administration introduced its plan this year, a few months ago, to cover 700,000 acres of lands in the 11 western states with solar PV panels. So they want to basically carpet over vast areas of the Mojave Desert and other places with PV panels. I calculated, and that's 530,000 football fields worth of PV panels they want to litter our western deserts, our public lands with. I think it's incredible. And I don't think Americans understand the environmental damage that may happen with all this supposedly green power.
So one of the things Trump has said he's going to do is pretty well unplug the Green New Deal. So how much of this comes to a grinding halt? I listen, as I'm a pretty libertarian person on issues of energy, that let people buy what they want to buy: electric cars, solar panels, wind power. Let states do what they want to do, as long as it's free market, without government subsidies and without government cramdowns. So when the Green New Deal is curb stomped, what happens to all this that you've been talking about?
Well, Biden passed $1 trillion worth of subsidies for solar power, wind power, batteries, and EVs. That's $1 trillion over 10 years. So most of those were in the form of tax credits. So what's going to happen next year is Republicans in Congress want to extend Trump's original 2017 tax breaks next year, and they're going to use all these energy tax subsidies as offsets. So Republicans will say, hey, we should have lower rates for individuals, and we're going to offset the deficit impact with repealing some of these Biden era tax subsidies. So I think that'll be a good trade.
The focus that you have at Cato, let's expand out a little bit. You're an editor of something called downsizinggovernment.org. It has its own Twitter feed at downsize the feds. It is the simplest and truest thing ever that Cato and libertarians and conservatives who are properly fiscally restrained want to bring the size of government down. There are a lot of reasons for conservatives to celebrate the ascendancy of Trump. I certainly do. Like Reagan didn't exactly shrink government either. We had a military we had to rebuild to go to Dutch's defense. How much downsizing do you see in the Trump mindset? How much do you want? And let's talk about some things that you might want him to do.
Well, I am optimistic. I'm always optimistic. I've been in this downsizing government mode for 20 years now, and we need to get some base hits at least. Hopefully, we'll get some home runs out of Trump. Ronald Reagan passed his major spending cut bill in his first year in office in August 1981. So that's why I think, incoming presidents have their most legislative power in their first year in office. That's why Trump needs to make a big move on spending cuts in his first year. So what can he cut? Well, Trump says he doesn't want to touch the two biggest federal programs, Social Security and Medicare. Republicans probably don't want to cut defense. So what does that leave? The biggest thing it leaves over that should be cut is over $1 trillion a year the federal government spends subsidizing state and local activities, such as K-12 education, public housing, urban transit systems, that sort of thing. I think that's where the cuts ought to land the heaviest. The federal government cannot afford to subsidize all these properly state and local activities anymore. There's no reason why states shouldn't fund their own subway systems and highways and K-12 schools and public housing projects. We ought to get the federal government out of those activities.
100%. And here's what's going to make it really hard. Chris is completely correct, because we send all this money to Washington, and then they send it through the sigmoid colon of government, and pardon that analogy, and it somehow lands back on us, so that politicians can say, look at the bacon I brought home. Look what I did for you. When you stop taking from my state of Texas or Indiana or Vermont or California or Utah, when you stop robbing those people blind and sending their money to Washington, you'd be shocked how much money they have to build their own roads, build their own subways, build their own senior citizen centers. How many generations will it take for us to get to that nirvana?
That's exactly right. Funding stuff out of Washington is inherently inefficient because of the massive federal bureaucracy. So yes, state governments get money from the feds for highways, for example, but that federal money comes along with a massive environmental and labor and other sorts of regulations, DEI regulations these days, that increase costs for state governments. So Texas, interestingly, has long been ripped off from the federal highway program. It sends more gas tax money to Washington then it gets back in highway money. And with all the highway money that Texas gets back, again, all these regulations are attached. So it'd be much more efficient for Texas to keep its own gas tax money and to fund its own highways. That makes logical sense. So why have we had all this centralization of spending power over the decades? Because it, as you said, it helps politicians, but it doesn't help the citizens.
Man, what a pleasure to meet you, Chris, and what a great bit of messaging today. Thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you again in some platform somewhere. That's Chris Edwards on Twitter at Cato Edwards. Cato, of course, is at cato.org, C-A-T-O, downsizinggovernment.org, and the Twitter feed at downsizethefeds. Okay, you got enough of that? There you go. All right, let me do something here for a couple of minutes because something just happened on the TV box, and maybe you'll see excerpts of this. You might have heard that Pete Hegseth, his own self, is going to be on Fox at some point. I don't know where yet. I've been kind of busy. My favorite place would probably be with Brett Baer later in the day. Somebody thought it was a good idea to bring his mom into the Fox and Friends studio. Just ride with me here for a minute. For Pete to be on Capitol Hill with his mom and his wife or anybody else who loves him is an inherently good idea. The mom story is weird. She seems like a beautiful woman, a wonderful woman, and she loves her son. I got nothing but great things to say about that. But the deal with Penelope, Pete Hegseth's mom, is she wrote this scathing, brutal email to Pete in 2018 when Pete's coming off a divorce. Now, the really first thing that needs to be said about that is what kind of bottom-feeding monsters would make such a private correspondence public. It's the New York Times, shocker, but they did, so it's out there, and the damage is thus done. What Penelope's trying to do is mitigate that damage. I don't know how you do that. Your choices appear to be, I was crazy, I didn't mean anything I said, or I've changed my mind since. I don't know. It's a big day for Pete, and I hope his nomination survives. Again, Hugh is back tomorrow. Can't wait. I think he's recovered from what happened at the shoe in Columbus. I watched that. Listen, I got no skin in the game, for the most part, but just knowing Hugh, loving Hugh. And oh my gosh, Ohio State's going to be fine. They're obviously still in the playoff, but wow, mediocre Michigan comes in and the whole flag at midfield. Hugh will have some things to say. I'm thinking about that and more than a few other things as he returns tomorrow. Before he gets back, let me put a couple of final things in your head. First up, the American people spoke loudly November 5th. Did you hear? I did. And the big rallying cry is, we want our country back. The election was a rebuke of a corrupt and incompetent elite uprooting our way of life. Some folks pretending to be conservatives are as guilty as progressive counterparts. So in his important new book, Dawn's Early Light, the Heritage Foundation president, Dr. Kevin Roberts, announces the arrival of a new conservative movement. And his message is simple. Hey, global elites, your time is up. His book charts a path for the American people to take back this country, and with a renewed sense of clarity and purpose, chapter by chapter, Dawn's Early Light identifies institutions conservatives need to build, some others we might need to take back, maybe some we need to deconstruct. So Ivy League colleges, New York Times, FBI, NIH, Department of Education, BlackRock, stuff like that. Dawn's Early Light is a blueprint for how we, the people, are going to drain the swamp, take the country back, and keep it. So let's have everybody listening get a copy of this important book. Go to Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. Dawn's Early Light, Dawn's Early Light by Heritage Foundation President Dr. Kevin Roberts. Okay, couple of things, and they're pretty important. I think I can winnow them down into something digestible here in the next 3 or so minutes. First, how about the Christmas season? How about this blessed season? There is a bright line drawn between things that are going on here on this mortal coil, things going on in our earthly lives, and the magnificent, faith-filled, ethereal, eternal message of Christmas and the birth of Christ and the love of Christ. And even if things had not gone our way in the election, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think this on my local show at 6:60 a.m. The Answer, or whenever I'm hanging out on whatever network show calls me to come in. Oh, the shows we could be doing. I could have been marshaling every bit of the joy of the Christmas season. You know, hey, Christ was still born. You know, salvation is still available. God is still in control. Just to get everybody off the ledge, because we're 7 weeks away from watching Kamala Harris sworn in as president of the United States. But guess what? We just opened the present, and we just opened the present, and she ain't going to be president. And it just adds to a list of things that I'm so unbelievably grateful for. So incredibly grateful for. So this might be, I don't know, I mean, I only got a couple of weeks more of shows. Don't know if I'm back here. I'll probably be doing a couple of Prager's moving forward. And while we're in a kind of a stance of prayer and thinking about God, let's ask God for his healing hand upon our friend Dennis Prager as his recovery continues. It is steady, but it is slow. And I hope you'll join me in praying for our friend Dennis. But here in this Christmas season, and coming off Thanksgiving, where attitude of gratitude seems to be kind of a good place for your mind and your heart to be. Just sort of starting personally right here, another year, I'm working on like 12 plus of being able to come in here and hang out with Dwayne and Adam and Harley and everybody here in Hugh Hewitt's world, and just to be a colleague with people like Hugh and Mike Gallagher and Dr. Gorka. Hey, enjoy those Gorka shows. I don't know how many more of those we got, because Seb's headed back to the White House to be a deputy assistant to the president and in charge of counterterrorism. So all kinds of stuff going on here in Salem land. But I'm grateful just to be a part of it, and had you guys watching here on the Salem News Channel and listening on the Salem Radio Network. And as we enjoy what this Christmas season has to offer, it really does seem like our country is changing. Listen, our country's been changing. And I think that the country didn't change on November 5th. The country we had been building for years what we then saw. It was the package we unwrapped on November 5th. We learned something. Oh boy, didn't we all learn something? To my delight and to the chagrin of others, we learned that we were a country that actually did want a border, a country that actually did want a functioning economy, a country where more people actually do know how many genders there are. And just a final word on a news story. The Supreme Court's hearing these gender cases, 36 states trying to protect kids. Your state doesn't have to protect kids, but the Supreme Court should say that it certainly can to stop these monstrous surgeries. So, hey, leave that for another day for you to talk about tomorrow. He's back tomorrow. I'm Mark Davis. Follow me on the old Twitter, the old X there, @Mark Davis.